Good evening, everyone, and thank you so much. My name is Gina Cavallo, and I serve with the New Jersey Coalition Against Human Trafficking, where I work alongside of phenomenal leaders that I learned from. We learn from each other. That's how we continue to learn. We can continue to grow. And community stakeholders on prevention and safeguarding efforts. I'm truly grateful for this time you've chosen to spend with us this evening. As we prepare for the World Cup, we know that large global events don't create exploitation, but they do reveal where people are already vulnerable. What makes a difference in moments like this is not fear, it's not hype, but preparation, partnership, and people willing to show up with intention. This evening's conversation is about responding thoughtfully, responding responsibly, centering prevention, protection, and survivor-informed practices as communities come together on a global stage. This is about awareness paired with action. As a survivor leader, I would also like to name how important it is that lived experience is part of these conversations. And I want to encourage you that this should not be an afterthought, but as a guiding voice. When survivors are included in the planning from the very beginning, the response is more human, more effective, and more grounded in reality. My role today is to help guide the conversation, keep us centered on purpose, and ensure the voices in this space are respected and heard. I am honored to walk alongside of each one of our guests this evening. They bring enormous expertise, and these are not just survivors. These are my friends. These are my colleagues. These are not just subject matter experts. We are more than what happened to us. We have our professional life, our personal life, and we bring our lived experience. So thank you for being a part of this work and for recognizing that safeguarding communities during moments of global tension requires each and every one of us. We can't do this without you, and you can't do this without us. So before I get started, I would like to go around and start with Melanie Thompson. You can all introduce yourself, and we'll take it from there.
Thank you, Gina, and welcome everybody to this wonderful evening and conversation. I'm excited to be in community with you all. My name is Melanie Thompson. I am a survivor of child sexual exploitation and prostitution as an adult. I have been doing anti-trafficking and anti-prostitution work for over 16 years, in which most of my work centers around the intersectionality of human trafficking, juvenile justice, LGBTQ+ issues, as well as systemic oppression in systems such as child welfare and foster care. And I am excited to be here and hope that we all learn something from each other, as Gina said today.
Thank you so much, Melanie. Katrina?
Good evening, and thank you for taking the time to be here today. Gina, thank you for that introduction. My name is Katrina Massey, and I sit on the board of directors of PATH, which is Protect All Children from Trafficking, as well as Restore. I am a survivor of sex trafficking, and I've spent nearly 20 years doing direct services for the youth that have been affected by trafficking, as well as legislative work. And I'm just really happy to be here with you tonight. And thank you for being here.
Kwami.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for being here. And thank you, Gina, for the warm introduction. My name is Kwami Adoboe-Herrera. I am a labor traffic survivor. And I live here in Ohio, and I've been working with male survivors throughout the country, and I do a lot of events for school systems, and do event for law enforcement trainees and presentations, whatever you name it. I'm there to help them out, and as a community, we do what we do to prevent this issue from happening and bringing awareness to the issue. So I'm just grateful to be here with every one of you today as we dive into this important conversation. as a community, as a friends, as a brothers, as sisters, to just learn from each others and just grateful to be here. Thank you.
Thank you, Kwami and Katrina. John Michael?
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Gina, so much for having me a part of this. I always am humbled and honored when you ask me to do something like this. So thank you so much. I want to thank everyone that is here tonight because this is such an important topic. And to have you here and to supporting us and to hear us makes us all become a collaboration. And that's one of the things I think is really important. I'm John Michael Lander, and I created An Athlete's Silence. As a 14-year-old Olympic-bound athlete, the adults entrusted in my training groomed me and sex trafficked me for all 4 years of my high school. And so I come from a different kind of a situation where I call it the CEO of trafficking, where people with high incomes are trafficking young people. So I'm glad to be able to share whatever I can today, and I support you all. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, John Michael. As you can hear through everyone's introductions, everyone brings different expertise to the table. And I do want you to know this crime is not a cookie cutter crime. You may have a particular crime where there's X amount of ways, maybe a few ways to break into a car, or break into a home. This particular crime, when we talk about exploitation, when we talk about force, fraud, coercion, it comes in countless ways. It is not a one size fits all. So what I'd like for you to each take away this evening is we hope that you take away, and the reason why I'm very big on bringing many voices to the table, as many as we could, because you're just not going to hear about how it happened to me, okay? Because how it happened to me is not how it happens to everybody. We all have that different experience and that different story. So I do want each of you to know that please share whatever you're comfortable sharing and whatever you're not. So what I'm going to do is I'd like to start with you, Melanie. I'm going to come to you first on this question from your expertise. If you had the world's attention right now, Melanie, you have some of it, during the World Cup, what is the one message you would want communities, decision makers, and leaders to hear and take away?
That's such a great question, and I have to find a way to put all of my racing thoughts into one short phrase. I think specifically when we're thinking about the World Cup, we often focus on the sporting event itself, and it's a very high time. Everybody's excited. Everybody that lives in America is usually a really big sports fan, and it's exciting that it's finally in some of our states. But oftentimes, when we are watching these games or watching these contests, we are not thinking about the children, the young people, and anybody, quite frankly, that is susceptible to harm. And if I imagine with this question that I'm walking into the middle of the field at maybe halftime, or maybe I'm disrupting the game, who knows? I'm walking onto the middle of the field and there's a huge Megatron on me, and I'm saying everybody needs to take a moment of silence, and they just hear from Survivors Across. And I think what they would need to know is that just because it's game day, it doesn't mean that trafficking has stopped. And I want folks to understand that not everybody that's in the arena or on the field is somebody who is happy and there by choice and there willingly. Just because there are parents there may be children at home with babysitters or with other guardians that may not be safe. There are staff that are working these events that can also be either under harm themselves or causing harm. And I want everybody to understand that human trafficking continues to go on regardless of what we're doing. So even though the World Cup and the game itself may seem like we're taking a pause in our day, it's still constantly concurring around them.
Thank you, Melanie. That was really powerful, because unfortunately it's going to go on long after the game's over. John Michael, you wanted to add to that?
Yes, because I thought that was so wonderful. You got my
Mm.
mind spinning and thinking of things. I just want to say that most of the times, traffickers have already been planning months and years in advance before this one single day. So it's been in planning for a long time. And the other thing I just want to make sure everybody understands is trafficking is constantly adapting, and the traffickers are always evolving. They're always moving forward and changing ways. So I just want to make sure that we're aware of that. And the more we talk about it and the more we share, the more we become able to disrupt that idea that they're doing.
I think John Michael Lander just made an amazing point that is not talked about enough, really quickly, because when we think of a typical trafficker, I mean, for those, there's still a lot of people that don't even know human trafficking exists in the States. But for those that do, when we think about an image or a visual of what a trafficker looks like, we're thinking what we see in movies. We're thinking, if you're from a certain generation, you're thinking top hats and furs. If you're from a younger generation, you're thinking very abusive, gorillas pimp style, very physically abusive. Um, and we often think that traffickers, like their only thing that they're good at is trafficking, right? And these are actually smart businessmen if you think about it. And like any other smart businessman or entrepreneur, they're often adapting with the times. So the fact that they're planning all the way up into this day, you might think that trafficking is only smuggling in a van or only looks like putting somebody chained to a basement or to a radiator or so on and so forth. But they know, okay, this big event is coming to town. We need to shift tactics. We need to shift how we dress. We need to shift how it looks. Maybe if on the street, I'm usually throwing people in a truck, maybe on this field, I need to hold your hand and pretend you're my child. There's so many ways that they adapt. So I really appreciate you, John Michael, for bringing this point up, because we often don't think that they're smart enough to keep up with the times.
Oh, this is a great point you're both making. Thank you for sharing that, Melanie and John Michael. Did anybody want to add on that before I move ahead? Thank you. John Michael, I'm going to come to you first on this. And if anyone would like to add to it, feel free. What is the most common misunderstanding that you feel or myth about trafficking that you want to correct based on your own lived experience? Not anyone else's, but yours.
Well, I do want to echo what you have said, and Melanie has already touched upon, that trafficking doesn't discriminate, and males are trafficked as well. That's the biggest myth I want everyone to know. And it's because males are being trafficked, it isn't because we want to be trafficked. We're being trafficked. We just don't know how to talk about it or how to come forward to it with it. So we need to start listening to our males as well. And not to take away from any of the females, please. I don't want to do that because my heart goes out to everyone. I would not be here if it wasn't for my female friends.
I agree with that, John Michael. I mean, it's for we need each other, and that is so true. John Michael said that he said it very perfectly. Like males are being trafficked, boys are being trafficked, and the problem is that we live in society that does not allow space for male to recover, allow space for male to talk about this. So we kind of have this social stigma. This saying we impose this will on male that's saying, well, you are fine. Don't, what happened to you? Just get over it. That idea of like get over it, that shame, that sense of weakness, becomes a trap for us that we don't want to talk about it. And because they are on the support system for us, we become our own support system, and not only is that dangerous, we don't know how to cope with that. We are lost and we are isolated from the public, and every time we open our mouth to say something about it, people look at you like you have lost your mind. It's almost like we don't want to see it, we don't want to talk about it, we don't want males to talk about what they have gone through. We don't care. Like people don't generally care about male survivors in this space. And we have to change that narrative. We have to change that mindset and say, oh, like John Michael just said, trafficking does not discriminate. It happens to anyone, everybody. So please, let's take a moment to help have safe space for male to share and to come forward, express their their hurts and their sense of pain that they have bottled in for so long. Let's give them space to do so. Thank you.
Kwami, you always get me emotional. But it's so true. I mean, we have to remove the stigmas, and we're not going to be able to see the reality and believe people and provide safety and compassion and kindness if we're going to continue to look through that stigma and what we think. I know this is a hard topic to talk about, and it's also, I'm sure, difficult for the listeners. And but we need to be courageous. We choose to talk about this because it's important, and this goes beyond signs. What are the signs? What are the red flags? You know, we could talk about signs and red flags until we're blue in the face, but it's being able to self-identify. If I'm unable to self-identify, I don't care if you're law enforcement, I don't care what expertise you have, I don't care if you're a healthcare provider with all the credentials in the world. If I'm unable to self-identify, I'm not gonna be able, I'm gonna be looking at you like you have two heads, because I have 3 companions, only 3. I have my shame, I have my other companion, which is fear, and my other companion, which is everything that's happening to me is my fault, and I deserve it. Anything that could go wrong is going to go wrong, and it's my fault, and I don't deserve anything better. And when many people say, why don't he leave? Why don't she leave? It's not that simple. And that, again, I encourage you and ask you to remove your stigmas. Because if you know about violence and threats, this is real. They are not making believe. And like John Michael, I want to echo off of what you said earlier about this is something that traffickers, people like Melanie, you said about the suits and these executives and these business people, they're so calculated, they're so prepared. They come into this, what are we supposed to do? Not trust the world? We do want to trust the world. We do want to trust again. And being on our healing journey, we want to take those baby steps and trust people. It's very hard to trust people, no matter how much they demonstrate good intentions. I'm always waiting for the other shoe to fall. I'm always looking behind me. It doesn't matter how safe the neighborhood might feel, how safe the people around me are. I'm always looking behind me, still waiting for that other shoe to fall, something to happen, and knowing that, how am I going to explain myself? Because it's automatically my fault. These are the life sentences, those old tapes that we hear from ourselves. But talking about this and not being able to be judged is so important. What can people do? Just believe us, provide that safety mechanism for us. There's no saviors, by the way. There's no rescuers here. This is about planting seeds of kindness, love, compassion, empathy, encouragement. You know, don't do something for someone and expect something back, you know. Anyway, this is why it's not a one size fits all. And it's so important to know that we all have vulnerabilities, and it could be disabilities. One that I know I struggled with as a child, and I still struggle with. People never know it because they think disabilities, well, you need a walker, you need some kind of apparatus, or, you know, a disability doesn't have to be physical. And I remember one lady said to me one time, she says, I would like you to bring me a speaker. I said, okay, what's the message you want? Because I want to know what your message is, so I bring the right speaker to the table. She says, well, we're going to have an audience, and it's going to be an audience of people where their kids have disabilities. I said, okay. She says, but I want you to bring a person to the table in her 20s and that has a physical disability. I said, so you want somebody to come up on stage that's in a wheelchair or a walker? Is that what you want? Or somebody that has special needs? She says, yes. I said, you know what? You're going to have to take your checkbox somewhere else because this is not how we work here. This is not to sensationalize. This is not to exploit, because we could reharm others if we're not educated ourselves. So that's why these conversations are so important. And it's so important that you hear from everyone here. So I want to move on. Katrina, if you're comfortable answering this from your perspective, what actually helps prevent exploitation? Not only even if there wasn't a World Cup, because we all know this is 365 days out of the year. And I'm like, okay, excuse me, we're talking World Cup again, okay. And I know there's a lot of organizations still trying to wrap their heads around what they're going to do. We're only a few months away because it's hard. I mean, I think it's easier for us, right? That's why it's important bringing survivors to the table from the beginning. But I'm going to inject in there for your question, Katrina, not only from your perspective, how we can actually prevent exploitation, but also how could we prevent it, especially around large scale events such as this?
Well, trafficking doesn't happen because of large scale events. It already exists. And what's key is how are we investing in people before, during, and after those events?
Mm-hmm.
And, prevention isn't fear-based campaigns. We have to focus on what does it look like to provide stable housing? What does it look like to have survivor-led outreach? Because, the reality is that we can't be in our children's lives 24/7. We can't always be there. But what we've seen as the most effective effort is having survivor-led outreach. And we have to give them the tools to be able to recognize what it looks like when, you receive that message or that DM that says, hey, come work as a bottle girl at this, event after the game on a Saturday night, and to recognize those red flags. They need the education, they need the support, and they need safe spaces to go to when they feel something's a little off, for any and every, survivor and lived experience person that I've come in contact with, we all had that moment where we felt like something in our gut, just kind of like something's going on there. But when you don't have safe spaces to reach out to in those moments, you fall through the cracks. And, something as simple as having living wages. I mean, that is a very long reach. But, how do we prevent exploitation is that we've got to provide a foundation that attacks those vulnerabilities, that address those vulnerabilities, because traffickers can smell them a mile away. And we all have them. And, just as mentioned previously, it doesn't discriminate. And we all have those vulnerabilities. So what does it look like to support someone and address those voids and those vulnerabilities? Again, creating those safe spaces in that moment where something just doesn't feel right. Where do I go? Where's my safe place? And all too often, youth don't have a place to be considered safe. And I mean, even more as an adult, as adult, we feel that, to even consider a safe space, we appear to be weak or as if we're missing something, but identifying what those safe space looks like. Stable housing is always a big one. And just prevention. And that looks like, I always tell people when we gather and we talk about trafficking, don't let this conversation end here today. because the only way that it carries to that next person is have a conversation with your coworker, have a conversation with a stranger, you know, and that just continues to pass on and pass on. And as we continue to spread that conversation and make it a normal, you know, don't make this conversation some taboo, strange, you know, thing over there that happens. And oh my God, I think it might happen here because of, you know, the World Cup. It's already happening. It exists, and we have to address it head on.
Thank you, Katrina. That was really insightful and great information. Would anyone like to add to that? You said it very well. Whoever would like to answer this next question, feel free. What is one thing law enforcement, service providers, and/or event organizers need to do differently to better protect people and respond appropriately? Would anyone like to take a stab at that? I will start. This is a very sensitive area for me because when it comes around the World Cup, I was arrested during a sports event, and I couldn't have been in my lowest of life because it was all low. There was any high. There wasn't any high. There was having a new identity. There was, you know, being forced to do something against my will, being sold to the highest bidder, being beaten daily, you know, pornography, abuse, drugs, sleep, food, all being used as rewards and punishments. So I was doing what I was told. And like I said, when people say, why don't you leave? Because after the violence, there's that psychological control. And I was beaten to nothing. I was nothing. I had no connection, no purpose. And so being arrested was traumatizing because I was the victim. I didn't know I was the victim at the time. I didn't understand what was going on around me, being sleep deprived, drugged out, food deprived, being forced, being scared, being ashamed, feeling guilty, having so much attached to me. So my hope, and which left me, that was not my only arrest, which left me, when they say after you leave that hell, because I don't call it a life, after I left that hell, after I was able to escape almost 3 years later, it was like, that's where my life sentence began. Finding out that I had 3 convictions, sabotaging relationships, but people finding out anything about me, it's like nobody wanted to be my friend. I mean, not being able to exist without any humanity, anyone you can trust, any friendships, any family, any housing. It was hard. And so my hope, my prayer is that people, I know I'm saying this a lot, but people remove their stigmas and not be quick to arrest. I like the fact that law enforcement is trying hard to educate themselves, but I still feel there's great barriers where some may be educated by the wrong people, or some may still think that they know it all. There's a lot of fear there with law enforcement, and I don't think that's helping the situation. We need to use great discernment, and I'm really hoping that, and maybe I'm being too optimistic, that we can get through that barrier, and people don't need to be re-victimized again and re-harmed, because once we see it every day, right? Either on social media or we see it on TV. It's like, I don't even open my TV anymore. It's like, you know, people getting arrested, or you see a victim that finally gets the courage to step forward and say, this is what happened to me, because we want accountability, because there's lack of accountability. How do we end demand when people are being protected by money, by their power? That we can't have those that are violating us, those that are robbing us of our humanity, if they're not being held responsible. And we see it. We've seen it with the Epstein, right, cases. These people pouring their hearts out, getting out there and taking that step of courage. And what happens? They're being reharmed. They're being questioned. They're being re-victimized, right? Reshamed. So we need to stand together. And I know there's great organizations out there, many in New Jersey, outside of New Jersey. I know all of you, and I could take up the rest of the time talking about what all of you do in your organizations, in your work, apart from your organizations, with your organizations. And I'm so proud of each and every one of you. I'm like really super beyond blessed to know you all, to call you colleagues and friends. But that's what my hope is. It's very sensitive around, especially this time, because we talk about sports events. Why do traffickers, they move around a lot because they want to follow conferences and sports events. And the second reason they move around a lot is because they don't want to get caught. And that's very common, to move around a lot if you don't want to get caught, right? So what can we do? Does anyone want to talk about that? What can law enforcement do? Go ahead.
I just want to jump in because Gina, listening to your story brings so much of my heart. I hear your story before, but every time I hear it, I'm just moved again. So thank you for being so transparent. One of the things that on this question that stands out for me, for the law enforcement, the service providers, and the event organizers, follow your instincts. I'm telling you this, you get a gut feeling, say something. If you see something that doesn't look right or feel right, report it. Because as I was going into the Rose Bowl with the person that I was assigned to at that time, who was like 250-pound African-American man, a black man, big, and I was this teeny 135-pound kid. And we were going through, they tore our tickets. It's so good to see a father and son come to the game. And if that person would have taken a moment and looked at my face, they would have saw the fear that I didn't want to be there. Instead of trying to make everything all happy and good, take that moment. And you can report, you can give a tip, and you could do it anonymously. But what it does is helps the law enforcement start to build a file for these people. And if you don't think that your voice matters, believe me, it does.
I'll add to that too. And when we're thinking about what we can do, sometimes I think that we're all looking for like one specific thing. And sometimes Gina actually was touching on this a little while ago, but all of these entities, the service providers, law enforcement, event organizers, even the staff and the higher ups at the venues that these events are taking place, they're all working in silos. And none of them are working together. And I know for law enforcement, it would actually be great, not just law enforcement in the community sense, but also just venue security, event staff. I'm sure that they all undergo a training or some kind of powwow before the event begins, but ensuring that warning signs and proper mechanisms for identification, as well as proper mechanisms for reporting, are explicitly made clear in these pre-meetings. What I know in a lot of these entities is that when they do talk about human trafficking, it's usually very brief, or it's a video that is required to watch, but nobody actually pays attention and they just skip through the slides. Or it's like, we don't do anything on human trafficking here, call 911, which in and of itself is a step. But oftentimes when there's a person that's being exploited, by the time 911 arrives, it's already too late. So think about, just as a common person, what can be done. If you, like John Michael said, it's usually in your gut. And I often tell people, if there's something in your gut, report it. And if it ends up being wrong, or excuse me, if it ends up not being trafficking, then it might have been something else that needed to be reported. And it might not be anything at all, but it's better to report than to not report and something actually is happening. Also look for warning signs in bathrooms. A lot of times we're focusing so much on the actual field and the pews, or the benches and the seats, and we're not actually thinking about the other spaces that these venues contain: concession stands, bar areas, things of that nature are good things to pay attention to. Making connections and relationships with other staff that are not necessarily related to the game itself. Like John Michael was mentioning, somebody taking the tickets, the security man at the front door, if you have to go through a metal detector, parking lot staff, which is so underrated at these kind of games. I know somebody mentioned in the comments local and nearby motels and hotels. And distribution of flyers and information usually happens there, but sometimes nobody's actually distributing this information or tabling at the event, at the entrance, at the exit, at the elevators, where everybody's going to be at the end of this, right? There are so many opportunities and areas where information can be infiltrated, or you can infiltrate to give information, or where it can be shared. Oftentimes we're looking at big signs, or we're looking out for big things, but we're not looking at small signs, like children that may be lost from their parents. Maybe the parent ran to the bar, the kid doesn't know where the mom is. That's always one situation that's really common at high traffic areas. Ensuring that if you are with younger people, or if you are with other folks, making sure you stay close by or holding hands, things of that nature. But also just keeping a lookout. You might see something in the stands or in the pews that other folks can't see. Be mindful of that and find somebody to report it to. Even if you don't have access to security or 911, you might have access to the guy selling popcorn, or you might have access to the guy with the hot dog. And these individuals should be trained to know where to go in their chain of command when it comes to events like this. So when we think about prevention, I really just want folks to understand that it doesn't have to be a high level action step. It doesn't have to be that you have the FBI on speed dial and you just save the world. It could be something as minor as the person mopping the floor, or the person restocking the napkins has access to somebody that can help. And just being mindful, do a general search on your own of what typical trafficking signs look like, especially when it's around big events like this, or specifically with younger folks. And as Kwami and John Michael both mentioned, just being mindful of the heightened increase in trafficking of boys at this time, because sports events are usually equated with masculinity. And although I am a woman who likes sporting events, we often don't think about the amount of young boys and men that are trafficked in these places, especially when understanding that folks that are watching these games are usually inebriated. So we need to keep in mind that not everybody might actually be aware, and you can, in a very minor and minuscule way, step in to be aware.
Melanie, thank you so much for all that information. It's really, really helpful. It reminds me of when one of my traffickers, we stopped at a gas station and I took off. I just ran, and it was one of those gas stations, Melanie. They had, it wasn't a quick check, but it had one of those little markets attached next to the gas station. And there were people coming in and out. And I remember, it's so funny, things that I don't remember. And then there's some things that are so clear. And to the right of me, behind us, was just a field, an open field of greens. And I remember I just took off. I opened the car door and I ran. And at that time, one of my traffickers was a woman. I had several traffickers. This one was a woman. You'd never know she was a trafficker. She was very gentle-spirited, kind-hearted. That's how she took me in. I know you're in trouble. I want to help you. And she was very approachable. Anyway, I took off. And I took off towards the fields. And when I tell you this gentle-spirited, gentle soul, kind person came after me and beat me to a pulp. But what resonated with me, Melanie, what you said, is that she was literally dragging me back to the car. And I remember one of the things that just made me remember was the people coming in and out of the market. And nobody said anything. Nobody did anything. Nobody came. And I'm not saying that, and I think my colleagues would agree, I'm not saying that we should get involved. I don't believe that we should get involved, and please, guys, correct me if I'm wrong, but you don't have to, like Melanie said, call 911 or call the FBI, but there are other steps that you can take without getting involved. But there was this woman like beating me up and dragging me back to a car. Somebody could have said something. Someone could have done something. No one did anything. So doing something is something. Doing nothing just enables the situation. Again, how do we even end this if there's no accountability? It's like we continue to be the victims. But thank you for sharing that, Melanie. If anybody wants to add on to what Melanie shared, I think she pretty much covered it, right? So we're going to move on to the next question. When we talk about ending trafficking, who needs to be accountable? And what does real accountability look like? I didn't really realize that was my next question, but it was. Accountability. I feel like that's the problem here. It's like chiseling through the accountability. How come 3 of my traffickers, when I was getting my convictions all cleared, which took many, many years, thankfully to the New Jersey Coalition Against Human Trafficking, because I was making a call to Kate Lee one day. I said, I can't work with you anymore, because I found out I had convictions only in 2017, give or take. And it took years because you can only address one conviction at a time. And it was strange because Volunteer Lawyers for Justice, thank God for them. They were the key for my freedom. But that time I did want to prosecute. And unfortunately, I could not prosecute because none of my traffickers were who they said they were. Not one, right? They all were someone different. I says, well, it has to be Joe Middleton. And I don't care. I'm saying the name. That's when you reach freedom. No shame, no fear, no guilt. One of my traffickers was Joe Middleton. He was driving a Miami taxi. And when the police, the investigators, the attorneys were trying to look up this person, because that was his name, they could find nothing. Because how do we prosecute when we get to that point if we're ready to say, you know what, you're going to be held accountable?
Absolutely.
Not that cut and dry. Anybody wants to address that, feel free.
I mean, we got to start with the buyers. The buyers create the demand, and all too often they are let off scot-free or a slap on the hand, or, our society and even government operate with this bro code where even when laws are in place, they're not enforced. And we've got to start with the demand, and we have to start with the traffickers who profit off of bodies being sold. And we see that happen a bit more often, but, I can't get past that first point, the buyers. Once we truly lock in with enforceable laws and, and a real plan behind accountability to those who don't enforce those laws, but we get to the bottom of this,
And I would even add to that. I know when we talk and hear the word accountable, we automatically assume that we're just talking about punishment, right? Who deserves the punishment? Who deserves the blame? Now, in this case, of course, I'm biased as a survivor. So yes, I do think buyers need to be held accountable. But in addition to that, I do think an honorable mention of groups that should also feel within themselves that they have a duty or an obligatory responsibility. I think we focused a lot on the event itself, but what about right after the event, right? What about when your team wins and you want to celebrate and you're going to a bar and you're leaving in the parking lot and you're going here and you're going there? I think all of us that have any kind of moral compass have a role to play in not only the prevention, but even the aftercare, right? If something does happen and you didn't see it and you didn't happen to catch it before it happened, what can we do? Like you said, Gina, without getting involved and putting yourself in harm's way. But also it can be something as simple as spreading information to taking pictures of the, like secretly, if there's a way to document any of it, of what you saw, going to folks and then understanding that, yes, the buyers sometimes need to be held accountable more than the traffickers. I wouldn't say they're necessarily equally yoked, but they're both bad. But also even sometimes the family, right? We don't talk enough about familial trafficking and what that looks like. And sometimes families are putting their children in harm's way on purpose, right? And sporting events, birthday parties, bachelor parties, these are the perfect places where there's a congregation of people that parents or other family members will put their kid into the wild and say, do this, stand like this, go talk to that guy, put a little smile on your face, wave to them, say hi, and they say, oh, you're so cute. There's so many ways, right, that you can approach this issue. So I just want to re-emphasize again the importance of being hyper vigilant and being aware, or just, you know, educating yourself, even in a very 101 level of the things that you could be looking out for, and recognizing that buyers and traffickers are the first people that need to be held accountable. But then there's also some self-accountability that we should be taking for not intervening or stepping in or documenting something. Or, you know, if you see something, say something, tap on the shoulder of your neighbor and say, hey, I should go ask or say something to somebody about this. And Gina, even in hearing your story, you know, very similarly, when I got arrested, I was outside and everybody just looked at me, right? And the mindset of most of us, and you know, I'm sure if I was in traffic, I probably would have had a similar mindset of, I don't want to get involved. It's not my business. I'm not trying to get hurt and I'm not trying to go to jail, right? So I think we all as humans innately kind of stay away from that. But you know, if the roles were reversed and I saw somebody else getting arrested the way I did, and watch them outside and just turn my head because a police officer was looking, I wonder what I would have done. I feel like I would have probably called someone, documented it, at least the time and place, right? So I digress, but I say all that to say that sometimes we have to also look within for some of that accountability, just as a member of society and a member of the community or a patron of the event. Maybe there was something very minuscule that I could have done that could have contributed to somebody's, you know, the difference between life and death for them.
I
Yeah,
also
no.
want to take it a step further
Mm.
because we don't often talk about the industries that benefit from trafficking. You know, we talk about the buyer, we talk about the trafficker, but we don't talk about the industries. You know, with World Cup, and you know, there has been some findings in the past, and those industries that profited off of labor trafficking to make this big event occur, you know, they've got to be held accountable as well. You know, they are just as responsible. And then the other side of it is the policies that criminalize the victims. We've got to hold them accountable as well. You know, we have to change policies. We, you know, most of us on this call, we work very hard from a legislative perspective to change laws and shift laws that create support systems around those that have been victimized. And, you know, this, and not just one thing can happen. All of these things must collectively create a momentum that ends trafficking. And that's one way to start. We have to break down those systems.
I just want to add to that by saying, you know, accountability starts with all of us, to be honest, also, because we are also are partaking in this action sometimes, not knowingly, you know, especially on country, this event is, you know, somebody put those events together. Somebody's been used, you know, to put these venues together and probably not getting paid the wage that they probably deserve. And they are working their butts off, cleaning up the stadium, setting up everything. And we are partaking in that. And we don't even know what's going on behind the scene. And so we also have to, you know, as each individual one of us, we have to take a step back and say, oh, wow, how are these things set up? Or when, you know, For me, for example, when you see it's a child selling popcorn on the street for these events or selling water on the street, what comes to our mind when we see those things happening? We don't know because I've done that at the big events. We get water and we have to sit and sell waters, at the events, like during football games, like even college football, college games days, we would sell waters, or popcorns or whatever you name it. And my trafficker didn't care. He just want to make money. That's all he see me as. So money, see me, money, power, control, money. I mean, that's what it comes down to. But so we have to be very mindful at the same time, be very vigilant about what we are partaking in and how we are doing that, because labor trafficking and labor as a whole, slavery never ends in this country. It just becomes a different form. We took on different form of it, and it's still happening. Labor is still happening. Labor is still happening in this country, and it just taking on different form and with different laws now. And so therefore, we don't want to talk about it. We don't want to see it. Yeah, you're a great worker. Yeah, keep going. You're a little child selling water. Wow, good for you, making money. No, I'm not making money. No, if I don't sell it, I'm gonna be beaten. I'm not gonna eat next day. So I'm not really making any money. I'm being tortured over here. So we have to be mindful and just be vigilant of when we are watching this game or just any event that we're at. And after that too, this is not just one day thing. It's a continuing process, and we see this all over the country, anywhere, any part of the world. We see this happening. So mindful and this all, let's be accountable to ourselves. We have to be accountable for what we are doing, our action as well too, when it comes to this event, especially.
Thank you, Kwame. Thank you all. John Michael, did you want to add to it, or you good? When I think of accountability, I also want to, when we talk about familiar trafficking, I feel it's important too that we have to go back to the seeds that are planted, which becomes our norm. So when you were talking about, families that do this to their kids, it becomes a norm, right? You all have mentioned it in one way or another. If you do this for me, if you love me, you'll do this. And now, what do we all want as human beings, regardless of our age? We all want to have a purpose. We all want to feel connected. We all want to feel loved and inspired. And I don't know anybody that doesn't want that, right? We all want that. That's what we want since as babies, right? We need our food. We need the love. We need the cuddling. And so when families, when caregivers and the foster system, it's another story, another webinar for a different day. But when they betray us, when our own families betray us, when my own family was supposed to love me and protect me and nurture me and cheer me on and encourage me, but they did everything else, but they planted seeds of horrible things in me. And I lived out what I learned, became my norm. So I also feel this morning, me and a colleague presented before 350 students. And a couple weeks ago, another colleague, we presented before 500 students. But we're seeing a common thread here. And you would think, especially with the age difference, that when people hear us share, it's giving them permission to think, to come out of whatever is holding them in bondage, whether it's domestic violence, because we don't talk about the domestic violence. We don't talk about the different cycles, the wheel of abuse, verbal abuse, physical abuse, emotional abuse, sexual abuse, spiritual abuse. All these abuses are different forms, and they're all unacceptable. Nobody could tell me any one is accepted and okay. It's not okay to abuse any other human being. Not okay. And when I see our biggest lines are kids, whenever I present with kids, they have so much that they're carrying from middle school through universities. And it amazes me the courage that when the assembly is over, they stay and they go online because they want to talk, because they don't feel safe at home. One of the things we have in common, our stories are different, but we share shame, we share fear, and we share, you're not going to believe us. You're going to judge me. Nobody needed to remind me of that. I knew I was nothing. I knew I was a failure. I knew I was everything I was told I was until I began my healing journey and I stepped out of myself. And peeling that onion was one of the most painful things I had to do in my life that I chose to do. But when I got to the core is where I found my identity, not what the world told me I was, my identity, my truth, and my freedom. And that's why, you can't experience freedom and live a life of freedom if you're carrying other people's accountability, other people's wrongdoing. So I'm going to move on to my next question, which is, I want this to be more of a reflective question. Whoever feels like they want to respond, just jump in here, guys. What gives you hope? And what is the one action you want people in this room to take away after hearing your message today? John Michael.
Yeah, I'll jump in here real quick. I think the first thing is believe us, and we're able to heal. We are able to heal after something like that. So please believe us. And I also just want to say that the most of the hope that I get are from seeing all these people here today, coming up and sharing and being a part of this, collaborating with us and working with us. I think that that's really important because, by not showing up only creates silence. And silence is the predators and the traffickers' best ally. They can keep everyone silent. They can continue to go and grow. So I just want to make sure that we're all doing that. I also just want to share that, I've been speaking a lot lately, this month mostly, and everywhere I've gone, I've heard that sex trafficking is women, labor trafficking is men. We need to stop creating categories that make us feel comfortable. We've got to stop that. It doesn't matter. Like I said before, trafficking does not discriminate. It's across the board. So that's what I really hope that everyone takes away from this today, is that if it's uncomfortable, maybe there's a reason why we're feeling uncomfortable. Explore that reason. And also, if a survivor speaks with you, listen and believe. Treat them with 3 words that come to my mind: humanity, create a relationship with them, and collaborate with them. Thank you.
Thank you, John Michael. Anyone else? Katrina?
Move from a state of awareness to action. And that action looks different for everyone. That action for one person may be finding a survivor-led program and fund them. The action for another person may be writing their legislator about specific bills that, that protect and support survivors and victims of trafficking. For another person, that may mean, I work at this university and I would love New Jersey Coalition Against Human Trafficking to come speak to my students. Leave here with one thing that you can do to make a difference beyond just being aware and learning in this moment. What can you do to create action towards the ultimate goal?
And in that vein, I want to kind of shout out, I'm seeing in the chat a lot of people already saying, how can I join the coalition? What can I do? Where is this information given? How can we distribute information? And I think in the 2-part question here, that is what gives me the most hope when I see people ready and willing to take action, especially being somebody who did not have someone take action in my case, right? So it's really kind of full circle moment here when we see that. But I would even add to that, something that I would want everyone to take away is what we said in the beginning, that trafficking is everlasting and ongoing, and it is not just it's not just because of this World Cup, and it's not going to stop after the World Cup either. And I think it's super important, if you can leave with anything, to know that everybody on this call and everybody that you know can do something. I think we're, like I said earlier, we're so focused on like only high level people can handle this kind of situation, or, you know, you have to be an FBI, or you have to know the law, or you have to know law enforcement, or, you know, or maybe this is not going to happen here. That's only for like extreme kidnapping cases, like on TV. It doesn't always look like that in every place, especially in metropolitan cities and states where FIFA is going to be. So we know that it doesn't necessarily look like what we've seen on TV. Two, you do not have to be in the FBI to do something or say something. You can always report something anonymously. You can slip a napkin to the concessions guy. If you are in law enforcement, and or if you are the higher up of these employees that are working at these venues, or employees that are working at the hotels and motels in the area, you have a certain level of access to be able to bring this panel, New Jersey Coalition, survivors from all over in your local communities, to be able to come and train with that. And I think that leads me to my last piece of advice. Always, always, always bring a survivor or multiple survivors if possible to be able to train on this. There is nothing more valuable and more effective than a survivor-led training. And oftentimes these departments, these venues, these sections are doing their own trainings on human trafficking, which is great, but they don't ever have survivor-led trainings. Super, super important.
Thank you. That was very valuable, Melanie. Thank you for sharing that.
Can I just add one more thing real quick?
We always say there's nothing about us without us. So we need you, but you need us. And don't call us after the project started. You call us from the beginning. Go ahead, John Michael. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I just wanted to also say, for people who are looking for resources and everything, go to the coalition and look at the website. They've got incredible resources there, and they've got that new toolkit that will be coming out too that will help everyone. These are just guidelines to help you get ideas of what you can do, and don't be afraid to reach out and ask. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, we created a toolkit that you will find very valuable. I also want to echo off of what was already said here, and there are so many events that we do as a non-for-profit organization. And I know we're New Jersey Coalition Against Human Trafficking, but one of our growing pains is that we have reached a national level where, not only in a legislative way, but through subject matter expert, these leaders that are on the call today, these are some of many of our extraordinary leaders that we bring to the table. And we're just careful who we walk alongside of. And the reason why is because, you know, I've heard people say, well, I'll get any survivor. You just can't get any survivor. I'm sorry. Because you don't want to, if your intention is good, that you really want to learn and educate, don't get any survivor. Do what Katrina and Kwami and Melanie and John Michael sharing with you. Go to our website, reach out to us. We will tell you who to get, because, you know, this is a healing journey. None of us arrive. But in order for us to do the work that we do, to honor ourselves, to honor you, to honor other organizations, to do this in a collaborative way, we need not to harm other people. But in order to do this work, we need to be on that healing journey. And it may look like different for all of us. We may all be in a different place, but we are all on that journey. We continue to go to conferences. We continue to go to retreats, whatever that might look like. We have boundaries. We know what they look like. But we also have a speakers bureau too. So when we bring survivors to the table, my two questions are this. Before we bring a survivor to the table, you have to have an HT 101 training first. Because a survivor is not about sharing his or her story. We're not re-exploiting anyone. We don't tell survivors what to say. I always, whenever I bring any of my colleagues to the table, I say, you share what you're comfortable sharing. I don't care what the message is, you share, because I have confidence in anyone we bring to the table here. And these are extraordinary leaders that you are here with this evening. And I'm not trying to boast, but I am being humble about it. So if there's, and the reason why we bring so many lived experts to the table is because you're not going to learn by hearing from the same person all the time. So my expertise is domestic violence, different forms of child abuse that led into becoming a victim of sex trafficking, the drugs, the homelessness, the whole gambit. But we all have a different type of expertise. My way didn't happen to everybody else. So if we hear from Kwami all the time, or Gina or Melanie, we're not going to learn. You will learn, but we need to bring different experts to the table. So I encourage you, don't do this work without bringing a leader to the table. And the reason why I say leader is because you don't want to just bring anybody to the table because you don't want to harm them, right? So if any, we're going to open this up now. If any of the panelists, if any of you have any final thoughts before we open this up for any questions that the audience may have. Okay, we're going to move on to any questions that anybody may have before we wrap it up.
I see one in the Q&A box, and I just want to address it. That somebody asked about the typical age that traffickers target the most. Nationally, the statistic is that in America, it's between the ages of 12 and 14. But we, as leaders and experts, as Gina mentioned, we know that there are those who become exploited or become trafficked after 14 years old, sometimes even in their 20s. And we know that there are children who are younger than that who have been exploited as well.
Thank you, Melanie. Anyone else? Okay. Before we close, I really want to offer my sincere thanks to each of you. Your voices, your expertise, and lived experience are what made this evening's conversation so meaningful. Just putting yourselves out there. You didn't just share information, you delivered key messages that were so moving and that moved this work forward to help shape real responsible responses.
And thank you for also being vulnerable and sharing pieces of your story with all of us as well. Nothing about us without us.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Melanie. You know, these messages, they're not abstract, they're a roadmap. And if we are serious about prevention during global events such as this, the World Cup, we also need to recognize that this work does not begin or end with one moment, as was said by all of you earlier. It's not when the lights dim, when the games are over. You know, this is going to continue. This is like an epidemic. Survivor leadership, informed systems, and community responsibility must remain at the center long after the crowds leave and the lights go down. In the meantime, there are concrete steps that we can take now. We can continue education and trainings. Invite my colleagues to your trainings. Strengthening referral pathways are so important. Supporting survivor projects and led organizations, as Katrina said earlier, and ensuring our institutions are prepared to respond with care, coordination, and accountability whenever, wherever exploitation occurs. And our toolkit can be a great guide. Not sure when that toolkit, I think it's going to be released, and you can feel free to share it. Thank you all. Thank you to the New Jersey Coalition for being a part of this conversation all, and the commitment that each of you bring to safeguarding our communities. And most importantly, I want to thank Kate Lee. She's like the pillars to our organization. and the New Jersey Coalition for making this presentation possible. I want to leave you with just 3 words. I mean, I'm big. I always like talking about the seeds that we plant, the seeds of kindness, compassion. Be that safe person. You're not going to go rescue anyone. You're going to just treat them. I wasn't used. Would you believe it if I told you I am still getting used to people being kind to me, treating me with, like, sometimes, and I talk about this with my counselor. Sometimes I'm like waiting for the other shoe to drop, or sometimes I have to be mindful that I may sabotage a relationship because I'm saying it's going to happen sooner than later. So I might as well, like, but they're old tapes. It's a reminder of me that of all those things, those little seeds as a child that I learned that you're not enough. You're never going to be enough. You're stupid. You're retarded. You're fat. You're ugly. You don't belong here. And so I'm learning different, and it's a process, and it's a journey, and there's no arrival time. But I want to encourage you to reach out to me. You want to reach out to my colleagues? We will be more than happy to connect you. If I didn't have confidence in them, they wouldn't be here. And I want to leave you with these 3 words. Love shouldn't hurt. And I hope each of you take this into your personal life, your professional life, no matter where you go, what you're doing. If you're feeling that pit inside of your stomach because something feels off, just take some time and lean back and find out why you're feeling that way. Because you shouldn't be hurting. That's not what our purpose is here. So I thank you, everyone. If anyone has any final thoughts, feel free to jump in as we wrap it up. Okay, so stay safe, stay warm, and I'm hearing, hey, I'm very optimistic, but I'm hearing we're going to get another blizzard this weekend. So hopefully I'm wrong. Good night, everybody.